This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.
So, Nalini, I've been looking forward to you coming in because ever since we first met, some people have like an energy about them.
Yeah.
And I think with what you're doing now, obviously my journey with the music and then the fitness and now real estate, I've been sort of struggling to find guests to fit that middle part, the health and fitness side.
Yes.
And then when we met, and then what you're doing, even though it's yoga and Pilates, and what I did was personal training, but it's still that kind of same environment of, you know,
the wellness space.
the wellness, and you've got your own studios, which I had two in Sheffield where mine were. And you're looking after groups of people. You're trying to keep groups of people happy. So I think we're there'll be a lot of similarities,
parallels for sure,
between what we're doing. And so it's, I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, cool. Me too.
So what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be an actor.
An actor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So coming out of school, I did a lot of theatre. I loved acting. Mostly all my experience was on stage. And so going into uni, I didn't study acting, but I did a lot of it on the side. And I got quite a bit of work. And then I started doing some screen acting stuff and realized that actually I didn't like it very much.
Oh, okay.
I really liked the theatre side of things. Right. But my dream to be an actor kind of derailed with that because I was like, well, I couldn't see the trajectory. There probably could have been one. But kind of what I thought it was going to be, wasn't what it was. Yeah. So I shifted away from it, but I miss theatre still. I think part of what I do now gives me a little bit of the same thing. Yeah. I get to stand up in front of rooms full of people and make them feel something. So
it's just they're in a downward dog rather than in a chair.
It's just a slightly different audience.
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, I went and did a class at Nalini's studio, the Rabina studio, on, what day is it today? It's Thursday. It must have been Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday, yeah. Yoga's hard.
It is, yeah.
Super hard.
It is hard.
I thought stupid.
One of the hardest things is trying to like stay calm while you're actually working your body in a really physical way.
True. I thought the hardest thing was putting one hand on the floor and pointing the other one to the ceiling and not looking like a 70-year-old man. That was the hardest thing for me.
I think it surprises a lot of people.
Yeah.
And yoga's become a really female-oriented activity. Well,
that's because men don't look as good in yoga pants. Lorna Jane has not created anything for us guys yet.
There is definitely like a lacking space in male yoga clothes. So if that's your next business. Yeah, I think I've spoken to a lot of guys who have been like, oh, that wasn't what I expected it to be at all. I think less so now, it's more mainstream, but there was always this like idea of like yogi people as like kind of off with the fairies.
Well, I mean, I guess if you think of it from on the flip side of that, people always thought weight training was a male thing, and now so it's kind of
the wellness space is changing a lot right now, and it's really cool. It's still very, I think, image focused, which what we do with our studio is try and pull away from that as much as possible. But it's also hard because we all look with our eyes, right? Yeah. And you see what you see. Yeah. But yeah, did you like the class?
I did.
Apart from finding it hard?
I mean, it's one of those things where it was so hard. I'm not saying it was hard. I don't want to put anybody off doing it, but just, I've had a particular, I've only really been back into training properly for like 12 months now. Yeah. It was January 2024 when I really sort of thought, right, I've got to get back into this properly like I was. Because when I got into real estate, you get into I never used to drink. I would, when I was DJing, people think that when you're a DJ, you kind of partying all the time. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was, getting home as quick as I could to get to sleep, because on a Monday morning I was back in the studio, or I was trying to run a record label. I was dealing with people all around the world.
It was a real hustle.
It was a hustle, yeah. And it was funny. I actually had a conversation at a wedding with this. There was a double act when I was sort of coming up. There was a whole group of us that were kind of the same age, and there was a double act called Jez and Charlie. And Charlie now I don't even know what it is that he basically, his marketing agency do all the sort of marketing campaigns for these big, Google and all these big tech companies, because he said you just assume that they're really slick in terms of their advert. He says only because they employ people like us. He said they're really good at producing the things that they produce. He said from a marketing point of view, he said they're absolutely useless. He said so they employ us.
But they know how to find the right people.
Well, exactly. They can afford to pay it. But Charlie flies between LA, well, probably not at the moment, but LA and London for this company that he works for, and he was even asked to do a TED talk because he'd come up with this kind of like productivity thing, I think it was. So I'm talking to him at this wedding. We'd had a few drinks, and but then he's like, Glaz, we used to look up to you so much because like we were just getting wrecked all the time, and you would just be like going home and being ready for the next day, and you got your record label. And I'm thinking, I never realised they were looking at me like I was just doing what I did.
Yeah. Did you feel like did you ever want to go out, and did you feel like you missed out?
Oh, I did my time. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
The DJing kind of saved me from all that, because I was on I was very much entrenched in that sort of life.
Yeah.
And then when I got the first glimmer of I could make something out of this DJing, and when I thought I could make something, I mean, I might play in the next town over, not end up traveling around the world for 20 years. I just stopped doing all stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when you're DJing, you've got to drive to the gig, and in England, it's not like Australia. If you're playing Brisbane, well, you're not playing Adelaide the same night.
Yeah. Or
if you're playing Sydney, I mean, if you're a Sydney DJ, you might have a couple of gigs in that city. But what I'm saying is, like, I'd be driving hundreds of miles a night, so I wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
And then I got into fitness, so I wasn't drinking. I used to say to my clients, it's not that I don't drink, I just don't drink. Because I thought if they ever see me, if I'm at a party and I'm having a drink, I don't want them to say, no, you said you didn't drink. But I just didn't drink.
Yeah.
It's only when I got to Australia that I started drinking. And then you get into real estate, and then, you get a listing, you celebrate. And then you may get a sale, you celebrate. And then, so I went.
Schmooze people.
Yeah. So anyway, fast forward 5 years, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so out of shape now. And then, so this last year, I've really sort of got back into exercising properly.
Yeah.
But it's kind of highlighting the fact that I need to do yoga.
It's a totally different ballgame. I don't think you need to be particularly fit to be able to do yoga. In some ways, like yourself, people who are like very fit and quite tight in their bodies struggle maybe more than someone who hasn't done a lot of anything. Yeah. And I think that's how I got into it. I was never very athletic at all. But my parents took me to a yoga class when I was like 14 or 15.
Okay.
And the yoga teacher, this was in Singapore, the yoga teacher like pulled me out and made me demonstrate something. And as a teenager who liked being in front of audiences, I found that really empowering. I was like, oh my gosh, here's something that I'm good at. I didn't do anything about it. I didn't go back to a yoga class for years, but that stuck in my
seed
head.
Was planted.
I'm good at this. And then, in my early 20s, I started going back to yoga. I needed to do something, so I went to a yoga studio and kind of built up from there, from this place of like, I think I can, like, this is my kind of movement. Going to like a big, like weightlifting or anything like that was just way out of, so intimidating to me. I would never have done it. Yeah. But I think people see yoga in the same way, depending on, their background.
Well, I mean, Jason said to me when we were there, like how everyone likes to get to the back of the class because nobody wants to be,
Everyone always goes straight to the back row, which is ridiculous because when you're in downward facing dog, you're looking between your legs, so you see the back row.
That's right.
They're the most visible people. No one's ever looking at the person at the front of the room.
I did actually think when we were doing the exercise, like the movements, where there was one point where we were facing towards the window, so Jason had his back to me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm looking, thinking, oh God, he's pretty good at this. And then I was super self-conscious when we turned the other way, and I knew he was seeing me like all contorted.
You'd hope he'd know what he's doing by now. I took him to his first yoga class years and years ago, and he was very he hid behind me, but like but he
So
loves it now.
I seem to remember when we caught up for a coffee that time, and you were saying there was a point where it just stuck in my mind, because I think this is something that a lot of people would be. You were saying about how your dad said you had to go back to university.
Yeah, so I wanted to be an actor. I wasn't that interested in going to uni. I wanted to go to acting school, and my dad he grew up in Singapore. He's of Indian heritage. He is like the most forward-thinking man until it comes to his daughter's education, and then he's like the most classical old school Indian father. And so there was no way I wasn't going to uni. And at that point I didn't really understand that I could have made a different choice. I mean, he was paying for my education. I didn't see it any other way. So I went to uni. I went and did a Bachelor of Arts. I majored in international politics and minored in history, both of which were interesting, especially the history. Great. I was really good at like table conversations, dinner conversations.
The ideal dinner date.
I wasn't at uni for anything in particular, and I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, except for the acting, where I did a lot of theatre on the side. So I'd skip lectures, I'd skip tutorials, and I'd go and do that. So I kind of just muddled my way through it. I think I've always liked to be, I don't like not doing well, so I still did okay at uni, but I came out of it none the better. Like there was no clear path forward. So for a long time I kind of just resented that time.
Well, I mean, it must be hard when you do, because I never did uni. I literally finished school and went straight into work. But it must be hard if you don't see the path. Like what like when you're doing something, like if you're building a wall, every brick that you put on, you kind of know what you're building a wall. You're like, or whatever you might be doing, or even like yoga as an example. Like every time you're trying to get into that position, but then over time you get
see
in,
things.
You see the progression. You know why you're doing it. But if you're doing a uni course and you don't know what you're doing it for, it must be a little bit. I would imagine.
Yeah, I just wasn't that focused on it.
Yeah.
So I was just, having fun, doing theatre, working hospitality. So uni finished and I just kept doing theatre and working hospitality for a couple of years, and got to the point where I was like, I actually don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I can't, what happens here? Yeah. And my dad was like, go back to university. And I listened to him, and it wasn't like, I think all these things now I look back, I'm like, I'm glad I did it all. But I went and did a Master of Business part-time. So I was working and doing it at the same time. And it was so boring. Really, there were a couple of subjects that were okay, but most of it was really boring. And sitting in these lecture halls with information, on the most part, being delivered by people who didn't seem passionate about it, both in my undergrad and my postgraduate. And I don't think this is everyone at all. I had some lecturers who were really passionate, but I think I don't know, and I think it's changing now, but the whole like school, university, career path doesn't make sense for, I'd say, over like 50% of potential things that you could be doing with your life. And that was really eye-opening for me, because that was always the progression. So it was always uni after school. And then I got there and I was like, what am I doing? And then I did it again. I was like, why am I doing this? But coming out of the Masters, it did mean that I fell into a job. Fell straight into a job. So that was good. I'd been living in Melbourne through all of university, moved to Sydney.
So hold on, so the Singapore...
So Singapore, I was there, we moved there when I was 12, so I did primary school in Townsville.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and then moved to Singapore. I did my high school there. Right. moved to Melbourne for uni.
Right.
My parents stayed in Singapore, so I moved out of home, moved into college. I guess that's another reason why maybe like my focus wasn't amazing. It was fun, but then moved to Sydney and worked corporate. Actually quite enjoyed my job. Mostly I really liked like getting dressed up in a jacket and a skirt and putting heels on and like walking down the street in the city in Sydney. Our building had amazing views of the harbour. Like there were these really like slick aspects of it. And it was great for a bit. I had a really cool boss. He did yoga in his youth, so we talked about it a lot. And I was
you're still doing yoga through all this?
So I went to a yoga studio in Melbourne that I like was there 3 or 4 times a week. And the head teacher there planted this seed in my head. She just came up one day and she was like, I think you should be a yoga teacher. Right. At the time I wasn't really that interested.
And this is 10 years after the guy pulled you, or someone pulled you.
So after that Singapore yoga class, this is 10 years later, you should be a yoga teacher.
And you said, well, someone else has said that before.
I keep hearing this. It planted a seed, and then I moved to Sydney and was going to a studio there. I was really lucky to have really, really great teachers as well. And when I was working in Sydney, I was like, maybe I will do my teacher training just to find out more about it. Not necessarily to teach, but to delve into yoga a bit more, to get an understanding of it. And also to do something outside of work that isn't drinking all the time, or like going out all the time. So something to focus me a little bit. So I did my teacher training, and it ran, I think, 8 months every second weekend. So I'd work Monday to Friday, do the training Saturday, Sunday, go back to work every second weekend. And it was great. I loved it. It was so nice to focus on something, and something that just made sense to me. Like for the first time in a long time, it was like, this is a space where I really am enjoying being in, and it's helping me so much, and imagine how much it can help other people. So I came out of it, and the teacher trainer asked me to assist in his classes. So I went straight into being able to work with bodies, and so he'd be teaching, but I'd go around and adjust. And that gave me really good confidence, I guess. But I was still just working. I wasn't planning on being a yoga teacher as a full-time gig. So I'd like go to work and then go out and teach a lunchtime class, go back to work. And I loved it. And then we decided to move to the Gold Coast.
Oh, so you met Jason by this?
Yeah, so I met Jace in Melbourne. Right. And then we moved to Sydney together.
Oh, right, okay.
In Sydney for 1.5 years. And then his family has always been up here, and we're I think we're engaged maybe by that point. We're like, where would we raise a family? Where would we settle down? The Gold Coast had lots of pluses.
And this is, what year is this now?
We moved here in 2016.
All right, okay.
Yep. So he got offered a job. It was a bit earlier than we were planning on. We were planning on staying in Sydney for a bit longer. But he got offered a job up here that was great. And it meant that I could kind of come up without a job, and I didn't need one straight away. So he was like, why don't you just try take this yoga teaching thing a little bit more seriously and see what happens. So when we moved here, I just got in contact with all the studios, all the gyms I could, and I was just running around from place to place teaching.
Right, just doing ad hoc
classes.
classes.
Yeah. So much time in the car, not like your 8-hour drives, but there was lots of kind of back and forth across the Gold Coast. And I was teaching like maybe 20 classes a week. Okay. It was a lot. Then, you wake up early in the morning, you get a gap in the middle of the day, you're teaching late at night. But I loved it. It was really fun. I liked the Like it didn't feel serious.
Yeah.
It felt like it was my own thing. And then one of the studios I was teaching at, the owner called me one day and he was like, you said when we interviewed you that you wanted to one day start your own studio. I don't remember ever saying this to him. I probably did.
You probably didn't. It just Jedi mind tricked you.
No.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
I have no idea. But he called me. He's like, we're selling the business. Would you like to buy it? And, you know, I'd been here maybe 8 months. And we were gonna put a deposit on a house, right? So we had some cash. We're gonna buy a house, and instead decided to buy the business, which was a bit of a risk. The business wasn't doing very well. Okay. Had like one member.
That bad. Come to your mic a little bit.
Oh yeah, one member. And like lots of, I don't know, there were things that were really obvious to me about changing structurally immediately that kind of got the ball running.
Well, that's good that you can, I mean, the thing is, if you've got one member, but you think you can't identify any problems.
Oh no, there was millions of, nothing made sense. Okay. It was cheaper to do a casual class than it was to be on the membership. Like nothing made sense.
So what, one member, but 7,000 casuals?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, took over the business, changed a lot, added to the timetable, and then was teaching a lot in one place because the business was not making any money. I was still teaching elsewhere. So I was running around teaching, trying to get this thing off the ground. The community of teachers that were already within the studio are amazing, and some of them still work for us. But I was 25, 26. And I just felt like, why is anyone listening to a thing that I'm saying? Like, what do I have? Like, how can I tell these people what to do? So I had this real imposter syndrome going into it. But they were all great, and they just kind of let me figure it out bit by bit. It wasn't like a huge risk. Really, it was in this old shitty building. There wasn't much rent. I took the time to kind of grow it up. And then 2020, we moved into a much bigger space with a retail lease. So business got very serious all of a sudden.
Perfect timing as well.
Oh, yeah. So we did that and we opened and then had to close a week later because of all the lockdowns. So that was a thing in of itself, and that taught me a lot. We just did online classes and we had an amazing community. At that stage, a lot of our members decided to keep their memberships and did the online stuff, and that kind of saw us through. So we got really lucky, and really like this community spirit around the studio is something that fostered at that time, and we still have, and it's really kind of kept us going. It's amazing. Some of the members are just, I feel like they're kind of like my parents, you know, like family. And then, gosh, where are we? So that year I took over the business, got married, was doing all these big life things, and I just felt like this little girl who had no idea what was going. Like, I was like, how did I get here? How did I get to this? And when you asked me to do this podcast, I was like, I don't know if I can, because I don't know. It's not like I didn't feel like I made any of my changes happen. They just kind of, the doors opened and I
Well, that's exactly what happened to me. That's how I ended up where I'm at. I mean, I didn't sort of
it's not like I'm going to do this now.
Yeah.
And but then thinking back on it, you are still putting the work in, doing the steps prior to the door opening.
That's right.
And that being able to happen. So I was like, I'll just step out of my comfort zone and give this a go. So yeah, we opened a second studio.
Yeah, don't just gloss over that. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just opened a second studio, you know. So when was that?
That was almost 2 years ago now.
So
So it'll be 2 years in April.
Right. So 2023.
Yes.
So 3 years after your first one.
Yeah.
So obviously
So 3 years
lockdowns-
after putting the first one into the new space.
But then So the new space was kind of, the launch of that was halted because of flu.
Yes. Yeah, and I was there every day filming. So
Right. Oh, so you were doing it, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because I could still go, because it was just me in the studio, either filming myself.
As long as the cameraman was 1.5 meters away.
Well, I was off in the camera, and I go and I like put it on and do a live stream, and just hope to God it was working, and then go and teach a class on the other side.
Actually, you just made me think of right. So me and my friend, when I first going back to the DJing, and there's a record store that I used to go into buy all my records from in Sheffield, and the guy that ran it, a guy called Martin Leverton. I don't expect that you know him, but he was like a bit of a, the big guy in town, sort of, he had like, he was doing gigs every week in Sheffield, and like to someone who was just like learning to DJ or recently learned to DJ, he seemed like a bit of a big deal. He got the record store where you bought the stuff from and all. Anyway, because I was buying all the hard house, he said, we've got a pirate radio station, we're running it, so it was at the top of this tower block in like a rough part of Sheffield where they did the show, and to go and do like a secret knock to get in, and the guy that was doing the show before had let you in, he'd leave and you carry on. But I said, mate, I'm not talking. I can't even believe I'm doing a podcast now, because like when I was DJing, like, I would never talk.
No way. Yeah.
Like, I just used to keep my head down. I didn't really even look at people while I was playing. I might look and smile every now and again, but that was it. I said, I can't talk.
Yeah.
I said, I'll go and play. And he said, well, you've got to introduce stuff. You've got to, do announcements. And I'm like, mate, I said, I'll get my mate to do it. So my mate, Ben, who was a captain in the army at the time, he used to come up on a weekend, and his nickname was Damage. I don't even know why. So it was Glazby and Damage, and we used to do this Friday night private radio show, but one week we'd not pressed the buttons.
Oh, no.
So I did a 3-hour show to myself, me and Ben. And we got home and everyone was like, what happened? We were like, what do you mean? He went, we couldn't hear a thing. Like, there was nothing.
That was my greatest
So you never
fear.
exactly, yeah. So I've lived through that. I've lived through it. So 2023, you opened the new studio, which is the one I went to.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. And that is, I think that's when I finally felt like, oh, I'm not faking it till I make it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, this is like,
Well, fake it till you make it. You'd made it.
yeah. I
You didn't fake it
like,
anymore.
because I have a lot of teachers that work with us, and a lot of them in their yoga teaching, I really look up to. They've done heaps of training. They're a lot more experienced than I am. I still always get that, like, oh my God, why are they listening to what I'm telling them to do? Yeah. But opening the Rabina studio, I kind of realized that, hey, I've actually been teaching for 10 years. I've done a bunch of training myself. Yeah. I probably need to stop feeling that way now. Yeah.
But the other thing as well is not everyone's cut out to be a business owner. Like,
No.
they're cut out to be an amazing yoga instructor.
Yeah.
But they would probably fail trying to do what you do.
I think there's a lot of amazing yoga instructors that are not very good business owners.
Exactly.
I don't think the two go hand in hand very well. And to be completely honest, I'm really lucky that Jace and I work together on the business. So from 2020, he started working on the business just a little bit. He was still working full time. He was just doing little bits here and there. And then by the time that I was pregnant with Marlo, our daughter, she was born April 2022, he was working part-time on the business, part-time on another job. Right. And so when I had her, he kind of came in a little bit more. Right. And now he's full-time. He doesn't do anything else. So I don't know. I do know. There's no way we'd be as successful as we are without him coming on. So I still don't have the like full business head. Yeah. But I know how to make things happen. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember years ago when I had the gyms and there was a trainer that I wanted to bring in, and I said to my partner at the time, and she's like, well, if she's such a good trainer, why don't she have her own gym? And I'm like,
Yeah.
not every trainer can have their own gym.
No,
Like that's
or
not how it
wants
all
to.
wants to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean
It's
they're not a
actually
good
really
trainer just because
hard.
yeah. Like just because they're a good just because they're a good trainer doesn't mean they should have their own gym. That's like a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
So,
And, you know, still to this day, my favorite thing about what I do is getting up in front of a class and teaching. All the other stuff is kind of stuff that has to be done. But it really, like, lights me up to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think I'll do it forever. Me and Jay sat down and like, well, what are we going to be doing in 5 years? Will it still be this or something completely different? And the answer is neither of us. Like, we didn't know. It could be this, but
well, I mean,
probably something else would have come along as well. Hopefully,
well, definitely something's coming along
soon. So yeah, and that's it. I guess next step. I'm kind of like, what am I going to do now? But I'm going to be a mom for a little while, and I'm really excited for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing with this podcast, I'm hoping. I mean, even some of the Chris, when Chris has been on, you know. So Chris is the lawyer that came on, and he was saying that, you know, it's just like a constant evolution. The stuff he's doing now, he never thought he would be doing. But he doesn't know what he's going to be doing next. Yeah. And it's interesting or exciting to me to think that we might be sat here again in 3-4 years' time. Yeah. Talking about what's happened since we were here, you know, because I'd like to think I'm doing
5,500.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. But because hopefully, you know, what I'm doing is going to be different in some respect, and so and for you as well. So yeah, it's I guess that's what it's all about, and that's
being open to that change,
and being open to that change because. You know, like, these people that are in these jobs that, you know, they're in it for the security and it's fine because some people need that and some people want that. But if you're in that situation where, you know, you feel like there's something more to be had, but in 5 years down the track, you're just doing the same shit you were doing right now. Yeah. And what you're doing right now is the same as you were doing 5 years before.
That terrifies me.
That's not, you know... In fact, this might be a good time to just break out and just quickly mention, because we did actually have from Matt, he sent me a message just saying, if you don't try, you'll never know, mate. Listening to your podcast made my mind up. You only live once. Get out and try it. You will only look back and think, what if you don't? Yeah. That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, so nice.
But that's the whole idea of doing this is that, you know, hopefully some people will go, you know what, I'm going to do whatever.
Yeah. There's not one stories. Direct path to get to the outcome.
That's right. So, April.
Yes.
You got a name yet?
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to say. Okay. Our family's trying to get it out of us. Oh, right,
okay. So. I won't push you on that one. And then, so in terms of the day-to-day with the, because obviously I remember what it was like for me when I had because you've got, how many, they call them trainers? What do they call them? Teachers?
Teachers, yeah.
How many teachers have you got working there?
36.
36 teachers?
Yes. Jesus. So we do, across both studios, we do 90 classes a week. Right. So some of those teachers, all of them, pretty much, most of them teach at other studios as well. Yeah. Is the life of a yoga teacher, kind of hopping around. A lot of them teach probably 4 or 5 classes with us. Yeah. Some of them only 1 or 2, some of them more. Okay. So there's a lot of organisation in terms of making sure people are in the right place at the right time.
Well, that's good, I guess, because, I mean, I was thinking you maybe had 4 or 5, but if you've got more, then when you're not working, you'll be able to...
Exactly. So I can pull myself out of teaching really easily, and I kind of have... So I was teaching, when I started, maybe 20, 25 classes a week. Yeah. I burnt out a little bit. I had to stop. It was just too much physically, and always giving out, like delivering to people, you kind of just shrivel up and become nothing.
Well, that's it. Yeah, if you're constantly pushing out and there's nothing coming back in. Yeah. I mean, I know when I had like so what happened for me is I got qualified as a personal trainer because it looked like my DJ career was on its way out because I'd got moved to the management company that I was with, Tidy Management, which was fantastic. They sold the business to a bigger company called Most Wanted, which is like a London-based business. And at the time, we were like, "Oh, this is going to be amazing," because they had some real big names on the roster, and with more international opportunities and all this. It turned out the guy that ran it was just what he was trying to do was keep all the DJs like exclusive to his events. So if someone wanted to see Paul Glazby, they had to go to his event.
Right. So he wasn't actually giving you any.
No, and but worse than that, they were putting fake gigs in the diary. So I'd think, okay, next month I've got this, this, and this, and then on the Thursday you get the call, oh, they've cancelled. They've cancelled. So my income it dropped by 75%. My accountant's like, "What are you doing? What's happened?" I'm like, "Mate, it's not me." Anyway, it got pretty bad. And then I'm like, right, okay, I've had a good run. I've had a few years, traveled around the world. Maybe it's time to just move on to something else. And I'd lost weight a year before and got into training. And then I'd really sort of immersed myself into it, and I'd started helping my friends. So while I'd been overweight, a lot of my friends that had always trained, they started coming to me for advice. So I was writing programs for them. I wasn't a trainer, but I was just because I knew what I was doing,
Yeah.
And then my partner at the time, Kate, she's like, "You should be a personal trainer. You'd be fantastic at it." So I went and got qualified and did the course. And anyway, just as I got qualified as a personal trainer, one of the other DJs that was on the management roster, Andy Farley, he's one of the, you're saying about looking up to people. Like I used to go and watch this guy DJ, like, how does he do what he's doing? You know? And then we ended up being mates years later because we were sort of, what's the word? What is the word? Not comrades. Like when you sort of work, someone that you work alongside. Colleagues? But
not really.
There's another word. But anyway, it'll come to me. We'll put it in as a subtitle afterwards, Matt. He used to come up to my place, and I'd take him to the gym, run through a program with him, and then because he lived in a different town.
So you were a personal trainer before you were a personal trainer?
A little bit, yeah. But I think by this stage, I was qualified by this stage, so I was insured. So but he came up, and then we'd go to the gym, and then he'd come back to mine, and we'd have some lunch, and then he'd go home. So we were talking, and we were just both moaning about Most Wanted because they'd dicked us around again that week. They took a gig out of his diary and done the same to me. And I still had the record label at this point. So the office for the record label was it like in the dining room of our house. So Kate's working away. She was the manager of the label. She's working away there, and me and Andy are talking, and I'm having a bit of a rant. I'm like, it's not rocket science. Like they make money if we make money.
Yeah.
I said you'd be better at it. And literally the next day, her and a friend, Kelly, had set up Red Management. And so I said to these guys in London, I'm like, I'm gone. Signed with her. And within a week, she'd got most of the top hard house talent on her roster. So what happened is
That's a dream business opportunity.
Yeah, like straight away, all the top guys, boom, straight on. And but then when so I'm at this point, I'm getting personal training clients coming on because I'm thinking DJing's done. But then she started getting gigs in for me, and my DJing took off again. Yeah. So for 7 years, I would get up on a Monday morning at 5:30 to train clients. Finish my last client on a Friday. I'd probably do 30 clients or 30 sessions. Yeah. Monday to Friday. Finish the last one at 7:30 on a Friday. Eat, get in the car, drive to a gig, do 1 or 2 gigs on a Friday. Saturday, another 1 or 2 gigs. Get back from London at maybe 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. Sleep for a few hours. Go to bed Sunday night. Back up again at 5:30 on Monday for 7 years.
Yeah. How did you do it for so long?
I don't know. Hardcore, aren't I? It's all this grey hair. It's like all of a sudden I just stopped doing that and just went, it's
But when you're in it, you're in it.
But when you're in it, you're in it.
Really,
and you don't know any that's it.
Yeah.
You just keep going. And then from there, that's when I then started doing a boot camp. So I was doing the personal training and I started a boot camp, and then I just remember one day I was doing it in this church hall, and I built it up. I got maybe 35 people in a session, but they're all doing, squats, lunges, press ups, all the boot camp sort of stuff, burpees. And I just remember thinking, there can't be too much mileage in this. These people are going to end up with postural issues if I'm just getting them to do press ups forever and they're not doing any back exercises. Yeah. So then I started thinking, and I'd been watching these guys that used to do a lot of like sort of strength training in these warehouse gyms in America. And then the cogs started turning, and because all the stuff I was doing in the personal training sessions, the one-to-one stuff was TRX, kettlebells, barbells, dumbbells, battle ropes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, what if you sort of combine the two, did smaller, not the 35 people in a session, but maybe 10 or 12, and had equipment for... So basically, when we set the gyms up, we had 6 battle ropes. We had loads of dumbbells and loads of kettlebells, but 6 TRXs.
Yeah.
And then each session would be like a superset. So 6 people would be doing TRX row for the back, and the other 6 might be doing squats. And then they'd switch over. So you'd have, in the rest period, they'd just go from one station to the next, and they'd run through that maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
And then you go on to another pair of exercises. But you got this group, and the trainer is just watching. They're only watching 2 exercises. Yes, you've got 6 people doing each one, but a good trainer can keep on top of people, and your more experienced people know what they're doing, so you're just shouting, coaching to them.
Yeah.
The other guys that are newer, you're hands-on with them and getting them to do stuff. So that's how we did that, and there was nothing like that in Sheffield when we started. Loads of other things popped up and copied what we were doing, but there was nothing like what we'd done. But that's when I had to sort of step away.
Because that's kind of how it's all evolved now.
F45,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that kind of training, but what I have done is a similar kind of layout, but usually just one person watching like a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I went to F45. I was talking to someone. Who was it? I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, "Oh, her brother was the guy that invented it or something." I said, well, I went to the one at Burley. I said, it was awful. Yeah. Like, it was really upsetting for me because people used to moan in Sheffield about how expensive our gym was. And we were the most expensive gym in town, but the service that we used to do full nutrition support, and, it was like full on. And, but our one trainer would outperform their 2 trainers, because when I went, they were just stood talking to each other. Yeah. And meanwhile, you've got someone over there doing a bent over row that looks like they're about to kill themselves. Yeah. And it was just ridiculous. They'd show you the exercises, and then that was it.
And you wonder why people don't, like, people see exercise as punishment. It's because, like, if the people need to be kind of nurtured to move in a way that is going to be enjoyable for them. Yeah. And if they're constantly hurting themselves because they don't know what they're doing.
But I met up with Danny, the guy that bought my gym off me. I'd not seen him for nearly 8 years because I'd not been back to England, and so we caught up. And some people, like, you get back with them, and it's literally like you've seen them the day before. Yeah. Like he's such a good guy. And but we were just having in fact, we had a conversation. It went on. I said, mate, I wish we'd got a camera set up for that. That would have been amazing, because we were just talking
that
about...
would have been episode 1.
Yeah, the state of the fitness industry, because he was saying about all the trainers that he's interviewed over, the years since I left. Yeah. And the people, they tell him that they've got 4 years experience. They've been doing sessions here and sessions there. He says, and they come and they're just going, keep going. One more rep. Whereas Danny's he's like an animal. I remember the first session he came and did at our gym. Some people would turn up, see his car, and just drive off. Because he's ex-army. Yeah. He was a bit too much for some people, but he was like
better than not being present at
because
all,
he was sort of aggressive in as much as he was loud and in your face, but he was making sure people were doing everything right, and he would get every ounce of energy out of everybody, which is what they were there for. That's what they were coming for. But some of the, I guess, because we'd have, middle-aged women that might be, 20, 30 kilos overweight, and that was probably his failure, is that he couldn't quite rein himself in for those women. That's why they would drive off, whereas I was a little bit softer with them. I'd still be hard on people, but I had that softer edge as well.
You knew when to pull
it back. Danny didn't have that.
That's a really hard skill, though, having a room full of people of all different levels, and being able to cater for everybody. That's right, that I love it. Yeah. That's what I love doing.
Yeah. It keeps it interesting, for sure.
And the class you came to the other day was a really good example of that, because there was you...
And then that woman at the end...
Fully
that was just
fresh yogi. The woman at the
I'm
end
a yogi.
Did
you just call me a yogi?
I called you a yogi. You did a yoga class. Yeah, Karina at the end, she's actually one of our teachers,
Right.
who I respect immensely. She's had tons and tons of experience. So I was a little bit nervous that she was even there.
Right. Okay.
I was like, oh. And then I think one of the ladies was like in her 70s. So it was just such a spread.
She was still better than me.
She's done a lot of yoga. She's amazing. It was such a spread, and I'm teaching the class pregnant.
Preggers, yeah.
You know, it's amazing just how much it can cater to people if you let it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of types of like fitness modalities, and even places that do yoga that really like pinpoint it into one thing. And if you're not fitting this one image, then you're not part of our club. And I really don't like that.
The interesting thing I thought as well, I was just thinking about this, I think it must have been when I was driving away from the class, and I was, so like the gyms that I had, everybody was always wants, you know, what's the new exercise that's going to do this or do that, or, you know, whereas your stuff, it's thousands of years old and no one's looking for, like, I would imagine, and are they looking for anything new, or do they accept that this is... It
is old, and it's also not old. I think traditional yoga, there's a lot of sitting and not doing much movement. It's
Can I come to that one?
Can I lie down now? I mean, yeah, that's way more traditional. A lot of the stuff that we're doing in what you came to, really these movements have only been around for 50, maybe like 100 years.
Okay.
And there are new, you know, I think 3 or 4 years ago, yoga got really popular. There's all these yogis of Instagram doing all these amazing like dance, like, and it's very beautiful to watch, but it kind of takes away the essence of, like, great for them, but not necessarily what everyone should aspire to, because it's about kind of figuring out your own self, not trying to be like, oh, I want to do what that person's doing,
Right,
you know?
yeah.
So it got really popular, and there's all these like movements that came out of that.
Right.
But I think yoga is not so much the movements that you do, but the way that you decide to move. So if you're doing it in a way that makes it feel like yoga, then it's yoga, even if you're doing a burpee.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
big things ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting things.
Yeah. And then obviously with the baby coming, will you still do any classes, or will you?
I am going to take some time off.
Nice.
Which I didn't really do with Marlo. I was back into it very quickly. And
You must have been, yeah, because you was the original studio was new, and then your second one opened when she. I mean, how old was she?
So we opened Rabina when Marlo was 1.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we just had the one studio when she was born, but I went back to teaching after like 3 months, and it just was stressful getting her looked after, going to teach a class. It's a bit of a drive away from our house as well, and I kind of resented it a little bit for a while. So I'm going to take more time off this time, and try and switch off from the business a bit more. We've now got a studio manager at Helensvale, and we've got another one of our teachers who works with Jason, our marketing. So we've got a bit more of a team supporting the studio, so I can kind of step back a bit, and I'm really excited for it.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's nice that you can,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Paul.
I'll look forward to having you back at some point and
see what we've done.
See what's happening, yeah. Nice one.
Right.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.